Hey guys, so I watched this movie recently, Anjaam Pathiraa, and I wanted to come and talk about it because I thought it was a pretty good movie. In fact, this movie to me actually had a lot of Hollywood-esque elements to it that actually made it feel quite familiar and really enjoyable. But before I get on to the movie itself, I do want to talk about the cast in this movie because I think I've seen Kunchacko Boban a few times, and I'm really glad I got to see him in this movie because I think it's been a strange journey for me to see him because so far I've seen him in movies like Virus, where he obviously had a bigger role than some of the other ensemble casts, but it wasn't a huge role. Again, recently 2018, he might have had the least amount of screen time in that movie for any of the sort of star cast. Then I've seen him in movies like Nayatu, where obviously he had a much bigger role in that movie compared to the other two, but he still had to share the screen with Jojo George and Namisha. So, I was pretty glad to sort of see him in his own sort of role here and how he could lead a movie, because I had obviously seen that he could lead a movie because he was so great in those movies, in the small snippets that I saw of him. So it was cool to see him actually. He was fantastic in this movie. He was such a strong lead with so much presence which was there with him. Really, the movie revolves around his character almost completely. So a lot of pressure on him to do a lot of things in this movie. And he just did a fantastic job of playing like this, I guess, something in between a cop, because he wasn't really a cop, I don't think, but he sort of played almost like a cop. So he played that balance really well. So yeah, he was absolutely fantastic and probably one of the highlights of this movie. But alongside him, I got to give a lot of credit to a lot of the ensemble cast as well, because yeah, this cast is pretty stacked. It's there's a few different actors that I've seen before. Obviously, Srinath Basi, who's playing his sort of sidekick. Jinu Joseph, who I have not seen much of, but we had people like Indrans in a small role, and the older character that I've seen, the father of the young writer, essentially, I've seen him in a few things, Jafar Iduki. So yeah, a bit of an ensemble cast, but the one I want to mention out a little bit more than even those characters is probably Unimaya Prasad, who I've seen in Joji and a few other things. She was really good in this movie. So I want to give a little credit to her. I thought her character was really interesting. She really showed like the difficulty that she was going through, being put in this position as a lead constable. I thought she portrayed the role of a struggling cop in the situation really well. And I think her story had a nice ending to it as well. So that's a little bit on the cast. I really enjoyed this movie's cast. Thought they were fantastic. And especially Kunchacko Boban. He was just, great. Honestly, he has one of the best action scenes that I've seen in any Malayalam movie so far, which is a big statement because look, I've seen a few of them now. But I'll touch on that a little bit later when I talk about the plot, which I'll move on to now essentially. But essentially, the plot, I really found this movie to be, as I said, very Hollywood-esque in that it was, really engrossing. It was a great thriller, like, a lot of Malayalam movies are, and it does have that procedural element to it. The element of mystery in this movie was really fantastic. It's just like, I think I was trying to guess the whole movie as to who the heck is actually the killer, who's the murderer, who's doing all this stuff, and what is the motivation. And that was just really fun to watch. It was a really fun movie. I'll put that. It was a fun action thriller kind of movie. That's why I say it's kind of like Hollywood-esque, because I've not seen a movie like be straight up like an action. And while this isn't like like a John Wick kind of action, there are elements of this movie that are definitely a bit more impactful in terms of what they're doing. All the characters, I really enjoyed just watching their journeys and the different sort of the small little things that each sort of character did when trying to solve this sort of puzzle out. I was really intrigued by the character of the leader cop, or not the leader cop, sorry, ACP Anil, played by Juno Joseph, because I could tell there was something off with this guy sort of early on with his interactions. But yeah, it was really interesting to see how that all unfolded and sort of who the killer would be at the end. Obviously, I never could have seen that coming. They really pulled one out with that one. I did not expect, a reference to a writer to be so important. But it just goes to show you that how much attention is given in this movie, and you really do have to watch it sort of with, a lot of detail. You have to have your eye on the picture as you're watching it, because if you don't, you start to miss things which might come back. And I think, no one could have expected that Ryder would be the killer at the end and doing these atrocities. But even after we find out who it is, we don't really. It's not the end of the movie. There's still a lot more to be found out about what exactly is going to happen to sort of the characters. What's the ending going to be like? Because there's so much ambiguity in this movie. Again, this movie does a great job, as a lot of Malayalam movies seem to do, with towing that line of basically, what is justice in this situation. One thing I really liked about his character, and it was a bit, this is the part that I say is probably different from Hollywood, because Hollywood movies don't do this as much, where they just suddenly cut and they go to like a backstory, and it's almost like an exposition piece as to show us what exactly happened to this character. But I actually really enjoyed that whole side of things, because the performances again was so good. I mean, seriously, I don't know if the younger character that played the writer before, thought he was really, really good. And I had seen him in Kumbalagni Nights, and I don't even think he even had much dialogue in his roles. He was just expressions the whole time. But more than him, I thought that the performance from the dad in the situation was really good. And what a heartbreaking story that this guy had to go on. Shout out to Jafar Iduki, who I've seen in so many things now. I don't know how he's crept up so much, but he's in a lot of sort of movies that I've seen. But essentially his performance was really good and kind of understated, because it's just in there for that maybe 5-10 minutes. But it was so good because he really showed how much pain and struggle that they went through. So they really did a great job of showing what created this monster, what led to this, events that have happened to this guy, and what made him the monster that he is, dedicating his life to revenge. And that itself is a pretty scary outcome. Other thing I really liked about the plot is, and again, this is pretty common theme that I'm seeing once again, it's basically, it was really close to real life. I would think that this is the way a procedural or police procedural would play out. So much like, dead ends, so much mystery, so much, things that have gone wrong. It just showed that side really well. And the conflict between the, different officers and things like that. To see the character that, Unmaya plays, basically her ACP or DCP, Catherine, I think her name was. She was essentially DCP Catherine. She basically, lost her job or got demoted because how bad things were getting and how the killers just kept coming up and up. So yeah, I don't know. They had a lot of really cool things, man. Like they had the, the idol, the picture of the idol with the it's like a golden idol which was custom made. And they did small things, like they would just leave it. And it was like a point of tension to be like, oh no, we're going to see one more of these, means one more death. And when they just show the background, I think it's the interval scene. They show one statue just in the background of the guy who makes the statues. It was like, it led to a whole new, thought process. Like, is this guy a killer now all of a sudden? Is he involved? The sense of mystery in this movie was so good. It just keeps you on the edge the whole time. So yeah, a lot to really like in this movie. This movie was so enjoyable. In fact, I might even go back and watch this movie again. It was that enjoyable because it was just such a fun ride. And I get onto sort of the ending, with sort of, I love two parts about the ending of this movie, which is really cool because, historically, like, the end of a movie is normally hard to just tie all together. And in this movie where you have so much ambiguity as to who is right and wrong, it becomes like pretty hard to construct a narrative where it sort of seems like it's right for everyone. For me, this ending worked. Basically, the sense of justice was that although, there's a killer with the writer, Dr. Benjamin, essentially, we could see what made him a murderer, what made him a killer. That doesn't make it right at all. It doesn't make what he's done right or just or anything like that. But because the movie spent so much time giving us an explanation as to why he's doing this, we empathize for him so much, and we don't want the character of this ACP Anil to really get away with what he's done, because my God, that scene was so brutal, how he's torturing the father, and he's just turning around to the sister and almost turning her as well, destroying this boy's life essentially, where the father committed suicide in the jail. Oh my God, it's a tragic story. So you do not want ACP Anil to get away with anything. Like, you do not want him to get away, even though he does not deserve to die, as per the plan. In some ways, you feel like he does deserve to die for what he's done, to be completely honest. It's just so wrong what he did to this person's life that you can completely empathize and feel for that character. But it's not just for how he acted either. In murdering, in his way of killing 2 bad cops, he ended up killing 5 bad cops. That's not right. Like, he should not get away with what he's done. So I think the ending was just perfect in that it just, the police officers in the police department murdered the writer because of what he had done. I'm not a police officer, but I can imagine, the brotherhood within the police community. If you kill one of them, there's going to be a lot of, fire in your belly to get revenge, because it's just something that you could see. It could have been done to you. There's other cops that killed him. They were just random cops, just like the other 3 that were killed that were random. So, it made sense for him to die in cold blood like he did for what he did. But, also it was just good that we just got that little, that little glimpse of the sister coming back and just finishing ACP Anil for what he's done. It's really well done. I really like the ending. It just left you like, okay, this makes sense. I'm really glad that they ended it like this. It makes a lot of sense. And before the ending, the scene before then, I have to say, is basically, man, that action sequence, like, oof, man, the action sequence in this movie might have been the best action sequence that I've seen in any Malayalam movie so far. The choreography was really good. I'd seen snippets of it. Like, it'd be arguable because I've seen some pretty good action sequences in movies like Talumala, which had a great cinema fight scene. But this movie was pretty good. Like, it was pretty high standard. Just the way that they were brawling with each other, the different elements at play, and just at the end, how we sort of get that little, the conclusion to DCP Catherine's story, which is her coming back and being part of the plan. It was really good. Like, it was just so well done. I really liked the ending of the scene. It was just edge of your seat action, adrenaline. Loved it. Absolutely loved it. It was fantastic. It was so good. I really enjoyed this movie, man. I'm just raving about it because I liked it so much. But yeah, I will get onto some of this sort of stuff that I've seen online a bit, because I know my reviews can be a bit on the positive side. And to me, this movie is really good. So I didn't see too many issues with this movie. Criticisms, I personally don't have too many, but I did look around a little bit and research to see what people thought about this movie and what were the sort of criticisms other people had on this movie to see if I agreed with it or not. What I had basically seen was, one criticism was that familiar tropes. Yes, I think that's true. There's a lot of familiarity in this, but I think for someone like me as a Hollywood viewer or someone outside of the Malayalam film industry, it's really cool to watch because I actually appreciated the familiar tropes because it made me feel like I was watching something out of Hollywood just in a different language. So, I felt like this was as close to the filmmaking style, the filmmaking technique in this movie. Felt like a Tom Cruise movie, to be honest, or like another sort of action blockbuster with, like, you could easily see someone like a Jason Statham play the role of Kunchacko Boban. Not that he could act in the same way because he's more an action star, but it had that sort of, action star could sort of lead a Hollywood movie and sort of do this kind of stuff. The mystery behind it. Really fantastic. So I do agree there were some familiar tropes in this movie, but I personally was all on board for it because I just have not seen it in the Malayalam film industry as much. Other sort of critiques I have seen was basically the character development. I think that's a fair one. I think that's a fair criticism. And I do think I was a little confused as to how Kunchacko Boban's character, Dr. Anwar, suddenly was leading a police, operation. It was a bit confusing to me, like, 'cause at the start of the movie, he just wanted to be introduced to the world of, criminology, I think, and, more from the psychological point of view. And I like how they brought that element back into the movie. And, his expertise was used to help out the police officers, but it really felt like everything was on his shoulders. Like, it felt like it was all up to him. Also, while I appreciated the ending of DCP Catherine's, character in this movie, I felt like it was just bits and pieces and it could have been fleshed out a little bit more as to, why was this bothering her so much, for instance. We sort of see her at one point, and she disappears, and she comes back all of a sudden later. Maybe she was part of the plan, to really show us, like, how much it meant to her when she lost this job, and what the personal consequences for her as well, and repercussions were. Maybe they could have done something like that. I think they could have done that a little bit. Like characters like, Andrew Srinath Basi's character, he was really just a plot device. And I enjoyed him because I think his performance was fun. He definitely was a great sidekick character in this movie, but there was just not much that his character had in terms of plot. Like he was like he was kind of a criminal, a genius hacker, no backstory, nothing. So I can understand the criticism behind that movie, but like, again, I mentioned the Hollywood references. Hollywood movies, the ones that are blockbusters, are not perfectly all tied together. There are parts that are sort of like, not all that fleshed out or not that well done, but you're so engrossed in the story and the thriller aspect of the movie, you kind of forget about that side of things. So look, for me, completely fine. I don't need to have every single character in every single movie fleshed out to the 10th degree. Like it's fine. I can have some characters that are just there for plot, as long as their performances are good and they're fun. Yeah, I'm fine with that. So yeah, the other one I saw was basically people who had a little bit of issues with some of the pacing of this movie. Look, I did feel it was a little bit long. They could have trimmed down maybe 15-20 minutes to really make this into maybe a 2-hour movie instead of what I think was like a 2-hour 20 movie. Yeah, I think that's probably one thing they could have done for an action movie or a thriller movie like this. They could have made it 2 hours. But look, overall, I really enjoyed this movie. And I'm glad I covered it because apparently it was one of the highest grossing Malayalam movies of 2022, collecting over 50 crores from the worldwide box office. So yeah, it made a lot of money back. And yeah, I was glad to see Kunchacko Boban obviously in a lead role. I think this movie was important for me to watch because I had seen so many roles of his that were just kind of cameo roles. I didn't get enough of him. So I'm glad I got to see more of him in this movie. Again, some comparisons that I can sort of mention in this movie. In terms of Hollywood, the one that came to mind straight away, which was, this movie is really dark. If you haven't seen it, it's called Prisoners, starring Hugh Jackman and I think Jake Gyllenhaal. But that movie is also pretty similar in that they're kidnapping using a van, and a lot of the mystery and stuff like that is also there in that movie. That movie, I would say, is even darker than this movie because it's like about kidnapping children. So that one really kind of makes you sick in your stomach. That movie was pretty brutal to watch. And the other one I've got to give it a shout out to, the No Way Machan again, mate. You recommended me this movie, but you recommended me this movie after recommending me another movie, which was from the Tamil film industry called Ratsasan. And that movie was very similar to this movie, actually. So I was actually getting the two confused before I sat down to review this movie because I didn't want them to overlap. But that movie was also really fantastic and really well done and really similar to this movie, actually, in Anjaam Pathiraa. But yeah, look, that'll do it for me. I really enjoyed watching this movie. I would love to know what you guys thought about this movie. So please do leave a comment on what you thought. What was your final rating? My final rating, by the way, is a dynamite. It's another 8 out of 10 kind of movie. Really good. Really enjoyed it. But love to know what your thoughts were. Did you enjoy this movie as much as I did? Or did you think the criticisms of this movie sort of held you back from watching the movie or enjoying it as much as you could? Let me know in the comments. I would love to hear from you. Love to talk to you. If you are new to this channel, please hit that subscribe button, hit that like button, leave a comment. I am looking to do so many more Malayalam movies. It's just been a whole awesome journey for me to do this. So yeah. Anyway, guys, I really enjoyed talking and I will catch you guys in the next one.